Jada Pinkett Smith. Deep healing horseshit. Hello, I'm H.G. Judah, continuing to bring you education about narcissism with a raft of videos about the various facets and dynamics and also real-life examples. If you haven't already listened to my fascinating analysis of Jada Pinkett Smith, I'd encourage you to do so. And there are other aspects, analysing things that she's said, things that she's done, the video footage that helps you understand more about her behaviours and what Will Smith has to deal with. I turn to an article written by Brandon Morse that appears in Red State, which, as the name suggests, is a more conservative publication. It's headed, "I'm starting to get why Will Smith is the way he is, and here's why I think it matters." This article will touch upon the ramifications of Jada Pinkett Smith's behaviour and that of Will Smith. It also provides us with further insight into the mind and actions of Jada Pinkett Smith. The article explains, Will Smith hitting Chris Rock didn't make sense, and I think that's part of the reason it became such a hot topic for so long. Of course, those of you that accessed my video, Why He Hit Chris Rock, understand full well why this happened. I, like many other millennials, the article's writer continues, grew up watching Smith be the lovable, joyful, fun personality that could go from the cool goofball on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to the heroic fighter pilot in Independence Day. Even his colleagues seemed surprised by it. Everyone at the Oscars thought the slap was a bit much, until Smith started screaming at Rock. In the blink of an eye, people that had loved Smith began turning their back on him, including myself. The man was an icon. He was someone you wanted to emulate in many ways, and the slap was completely uncharacteristic of him. It's like he had turned his back on himself, and as a result, we turned our back on him too. But it took exactly 0 minutes for people to begin speculating as to why he was behaving like he was. Lurking behind Smith was Jada Pinkett Smith, his wife. While Will was laughing at Rock's joke, Jada was not, and that immediately made Mr. Smith get aggressive. It was odd, and it made Smith look weak, despite being a physical aggressor. He was clearly under the full control of his wife. The focus cleanly shifted from Will to Jada and her behaviour. It was clear that she was abusive, admitting to cuckolding her husband on a major platform, has been shown to be verbally and emotionally antagonistic. And now, her latest Red Table talk has pretty much sealed the deal, at least for me. It would appear that Jada is using Will Smith's slap as a way to promote her Red Table Talk show. First, with a tweet effectively saying that her family is going through deep healing, but when they're ready to talk about it, it'll be done on the show. And the article exposes the tweet, which comes from Red Table Talk, and it's basically split screen with just some text on a black background, which reads, "Considering all that has happened in the last few weeks, the Smith family has been focusing on deep healing. Grandiosity, word salad." The notion of healing with Jada Pinkett Smith is basically to find a young troubled man and burn some calories on his dick by bouncing up and down on him and getting him into bed, dialing out some spicy poontang. We have seen in parts passing of the series about Jada Pinkett Smith where she, in the interview which I broke down, or rather the talk that she had with Will Smith, she talked about healing, deep healing. She, in her deluded world, believes that it is appropriate to transgress boundaries, to humiliate, invalidate, and belittle her husband, the intimate partner primary source, because it's all part of healing. She believes that she's allowed to go and sleep with who she wants, because it's all part of understanding who she wants, who she is, as she needs to heal. She's trotted out this phrase, deep healing, before. And it's quite simply smoke and mirrors. It's designed to make her look like she's kind and empathic, that there is troubles that are there, and indeed there are, but somehow there can be healing that can come forward and cure them. She has been with Smith for over 20 years, and her behaviour towards him continues to be abusive. Where is the healing? She embodies the deluded mindset of the mid-range narcissist that believes that the problems can be healed, but doesn't realise that she is the problem. She believes that the problems can be healed, but doesn't see that her behaviour has continued despite this healing. Mid-range narcissists commonly utilise therapy. They don't do so because they are going to change. They do so because it allows them to manage a facade, to demonstrate to the world, I know I've got some issues, but I'm working on them. I'm going to work through them. Or, I've done a lot of work on myself and I'm a better person. Well, ask any of the victims of that individual and they'll tell you pretty quickly that nothing changed whatsoever. But in the deluded mind of the mid-range narcissist, that narcissist believes that this healing, this self-work, this therapy has caused them to look deep within themselves and become a better person. It's quite clear that isn't accurate. The tweet continues. Some of the discoveries around our healing will be shared at the table when the time calls. Basically, very private matters that take place within the family are going to be aired. It's akin to Will Smith turning up and getting his cock and balls out and popping on the red table and saying, there you are, you can all see it now. Hopefully he won't crescendo all over the table. That would probably make a bit of a mess. But the point is that she, with no boundary recognition, her sense of entitlement, no emotional empathy for Smith or the other members of the family, her lack of accountability for her behaviour, deems that it is entirely acceptable for her to take the intimacies of the discussions and throw them into the public domain. And what she then does, of course, understanding this through the lens of narcissism, is she triangulates the viewership in order to control them with these events. So that those who don't access my work, who don't see through who she is, think that she's working on herself, that this is a good thing, that you should get these things out and show them in public. Then continues, until then, the table will continue offering itself to powerful, inspiring, and healing, their world again, testimonies like that of our incredibly impressive first guest. Thanks for joining us, Jada. The Red Table Talk is nothing more than a vehicle for her narcissism. It allows her to assert control over her guests, over her family members, and over the viewership. It's part of a facade management. It draws fuel from people's responses. There's the residual benefit of that facade management, and of course the money that comes with it. Furthermore, character trait acquisition, because she will utilize the experiences of other people and harness them for her own advantages. The Red Table Talk is an exercise in narcissism in action and humiliates her family members. It demonstrates how she operates with a sense of entitlement, no accountability for her actions, and a complete absence of emotional empathy. Returning to the article, which is now, of course, getting on board with the fact that Will Smith may well be the victim of abuse, the author writes, looking back on the way that Smith conducted himself around his children, he always seemed highly supportive and as involved as a parent could be. Demonstration of emotional empathy, parental accountability. He was always highly complimentary of his wife. Sure, it could have all been an act, but fakery of that magnitude doesn't seem to fit with Smith's personality. And indeed it doesn't, as we've established elsewhere, that Will Smith is an empath. But the article states, but it does with Jada. Let me be very clear. I think Smith should 100% face the consequences of his actions for assaulting Rock, but I'm beginning to understand him better. Smith, like many more before him, became a bully because he's bullied at home. And as I explained, Smith's emotional empathy for Rock was eroded as a consequence of the abuse that he's subjected to. And that is why he did what he did. Not because he's a bad person, not because he's a nasty individual, but that his narcissistic traits of pride, argumentativeness, and anger spilled over because the shrouding emotional empathy was removed. In the same way that Prince Harry continues to throw brickbats at his extended family and mouths the words put in his mouth as he's puppeted by his wife, he does so because his own emotional empathy has been eroded as a consequence of the abuse that he's been repeatedly subjected to. And if you want to understand more about that, listen to my recent video, Harry's Lost the Plot. The author continues. He was in love with a woman who clearly doesn't love him back, correct? And it seems his actions were a most desperate attempt to win her over. It's an attempt that will only serve to give Jada more ammo for herself to use against him and promote her own endeavours with rumours of a divorce from insiders to boot. Relationships are never clean. They're complicated, filled with ups and downs, and loving moments are about as guaranteed as resentments. But again, understand that so many people fall into the trap of believing that when they're being abused, that's just part of the vagary of a relationship. It is not. There are ups and downs caused by what the world throws at you. But the relationship, whereas abuse, that isn't the ups and downs, that's abuse. A couple that cares about one another will work to elevate the good in each other and forgive hurts. They learn to live as individual people who are one being. When one person is trying to do this and the other has no interest, and what's more is abusive, antagonistic, and malicious towards the person that loves them, then the person in love can be absolutely destroyed. Smith is clearly a destroyed man. It's sad that in our society today there's not a lot of sympathy for someone like Smith. Men typically don't get the emotional support that women do when in abusive relationships. That's not to say things aren't getting better, but they could be much better, and should be much better. The numbers of abused men in this country, the United States, are higher than you think. The CDC reported back in 2014 that 48% of men experience psychological and emotional abuse at the hands of their partners. Now, interestingly, isn't it, that people who have suffered psychological and emotional abuse might have done so on a one-off basis, but they probably wouldn't describe it necessarily as abuse. Abuse would suggest a more likely pattern of events. And that figure of 48%, well, who is it that abuses repeatedly, systematically? My kind, the narcissists. And I've explained before when people have asked me, people have said, HG, what's the split along gender lines in narcissism? I said it's roughly 50-50. Many people mistakenly think that most of the narcissists are men. It's not the case. Female narcissists are often harder to spot because more of them are mid-range. Also, of course, others are mislabeled, given titles of borderline, and actually, in fact, they're a narcissist. And listen to my video, The Borderline. This figure of 48% supports my observation that the number of female and male narcissists is roughly equal. The article continues, that number might be off since men typically don't admit to abuse in their relationships. The reasons they may keep it to themselves range from fear that doing so would lead to a divorce and losing the children, to not being believed or even named the aggressor. Women are more often believed to be innocent right off the bat without evidence, and even after evidence is presented, many men are still looked at with suspicion. The Smiths are an example of a destabilised family, but the more evidence I see, the more I'm beginning to think the reason is that one of the legs on the table is wobbly and failing to give support where it's needed. Jada's behaviour has been shown to be malicious and self-centred. She clearly resents her husband, who was only shown to be supportive and loving. I think this example is a good one on how we, as a society, might be getting relationship dynamics very wrong. And indeed, the author is largely correct. Of course, they don't go so far as to recognise narcissism, and that's the problem with the relationship dynamic. But they are heading along the right route. So it's interesting, of course, to see this particular author starting to put the pieces together and to comment upon the position of seeing that Smith is the victim of abuse. It also, of course, provides us with evidence of that further abuse continuing as Jada Pinkett Smith engages in the continuance of her grandiosity, the assertion of control, the word salad, with the deep, healing horseshit. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.